Okay, so what is the error? Can you tell me the error which you are getting? Can you tell me the IP which you are trying to access? Mm, I am able to start the machine. Can you try it now once? It's running. I just logged in into the machine. You can try it now. It should be working right now. Right. So yeah, today we're going to see what is how to use an Excel. What is the code required to open an Excel? How to read data from Excel? How to write data back to Excel? And we're gonna see after that we will see try catch block, and we'll finally, if time permits, we'll also see how to use a logger. What is a logger? Why do we use logger? And etc. Okay. So any questions till yesterday's sessions? Did anybody practice? Did you get any sort of doubts or something? Any open queries? No open queries. So I hope everybody is following the pace. If you have any issues regarding the way of delivering the teaching, you guys are open to just suggest, and I can adjust accordingly. So if you need any things to be changed, please do let me know. I can see if I can incorporate those changes. Okay. Now let's start with the session. So you guys are able to see my screen. Yes, no. Okay, fine. So have you guys used Excel earlier? Anytime? So do you use in any of your manual testing projects or at any point of time? Cool. So you guys are familiar what is an Excel, right? Okay. So what are we trying to do here is, so there might be scenarios in which you might have a list of inputs for a web application. For instance, you can assume that let's take this example, login example. Now you are supposed to test a group of login. Say you get a list of login IDs, and you are supposed to test the accessibility of that particular person using the list. So in Selenium, what you can do is you can just put the list in an Excel. You can read that Excel, and you can automate your inputs using that particular Excel and test if the login is successfully working or not. Okay. So for instance, so today let's take this particular. So we'll go with this site. and we're gonna use the Excel, and we're gonna see how we can automate the inputs, and see how we can, what is the things, items required for using an Excel, right? So first thing you need to know is, in order to access an Excel, it is not like just a text file. So you will need a set of jars, so additional libraries, and you can get those additional libraries using this particular URL. So it is called as poi jars. Okay. So you use this URL, you will come here, you click over this, you will be able to download the jars zip file. Okay. And secondly, since you guys are actually facing issues regarding copy pasting the URLs in the remote machine, I will show you how exactly you can actually reach that particular place. Okay. So all you have to do is search in the Google, search for poi jars download. Okay. So take the first link and click over this particular URL. So in the binary distribution, click on .zip file link. Okay. So once you click on this, you will reach this particular page. So whatever page, the link I showed you, you will reach that page. Okay. So if you are finding difficulties in copy pasting the URLs, no issues. You can just search for poi jars download, get the first link, and and from there you can always traverse to this page. Clear? Yes or no? What about others? Are you able to follow me? Okay. So once you download the jars, the rest of the process is simple. Please copy the jars, and I will send you the list of jar files which you have to copy. So if I'm sure, right. So once you unzip, it will look something like this. Okay. Somewhere you will have to copy these 6 jar files. Okay. And these 4 files. Okay. So that's 10, and this one 11. So 11 files you will have to copy. So this particular library zip file already contains the log4j. So you just copy all these 11 jar files, paste it in your lib folder, right click, add to build path. I assume you guys know the way of adding to the build path. So once you paste it over here, all you have to do is select those additionally added library files. Okay, select all of them, right click, add to build path. So you will get an option of adding it to the build path. Oops. Okay, so it will show you something like this. Copy, paste, paste. So these are the set of files which you need to copy and paste. Okay, so once you add all these things, select all of them, right click, add to build path. Once you add it, those library files will be added in your build path. So they are ready for use basically. Clear? Okay, fine. So once the library files are added, which essentially means you can access the file library files in order to access read an Excel. Okay, and in for us to read an Excel, let me first write a basic program so that you guys are much familiar with. It's easy to understand. So I'm gonna create a class. All right, create a class. A simple class with a main function. Okay. Now in this, what I'm going to do is first I'll have to identify an Excel in my system. So first you'll have to place an Excel in your local system. So okay. So let's create. So what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna create an Excel with a list of username passwords, and I'm gonna read them in my Selenium automation. I'm gonna apply these inputs as the input to the text boxes for username password, and as per the resultant, I'm gonna populate the third column over here saying access granted or access denied. Okay, so this is a target which we are trying to achieve. So I don't know what other access we have. So let me get. So I'm just trying to get a list of usernames in this application. Just 2 minutes. So you guys were able to practice what we thought so far, JUnit, writing a normal Selenium program, etc. Anybody at least tried writing a sample program, seeing how it actually works? Okay, nice. Okay, so I considered here 4 username passwords. So let's actually try. Let me save this file first. And tomorrow you guys have working, or is it holiday? Okay, fine. So I'm going to save it as login check. Here is my Excel. So since I have got my path, now I will have to go write the code for reading the Excel. And now one thing which you have to remember in Excel is it's not like a simple text file. So if you see an Excel as such, so you have this complete item which you see over here is something called as a workbook. Okay, and each workbook can have multiple sheets. Correct? So there can be sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, etc. Okay, so same way, when you write a program for accessing the complete Excel, so first what you get is, first once you give the path, you will get the complete access over the workbook. Now for you to read a cell or the content inside, you will have to choose the sheet in which the content is present, or at least you will get a list of sheets. On the list of sheets, you'll have to iterate and get or choose a particular sheet, save it in object, and that particular object will give you the access or over the reading each and every cell. Okay, so let's go ahead and try making reading an Excel. Okay, so first is accessing that particular file path. So here is the code. So let me just reuse the code. So I have to use a file input stream, which is an IO application, input output application given by Java. Okay, so this file input stream will help us to actually read any file from the local file system. Okay, so first thing I have to do is I have to give the path. So I have to give the complete absolute path. Where is that? Users desktop. What will be the absolute path? Wait. So this is my path, and this is the file name. Okay. So I have to create the objects accordingly. And I'll also have to give the sheet name. So my sheet name would be sheet space 1. So here. Okay, so I use the file input stream. I give the path in which my Excel file is present. Okay, and as I said, the Excel contains two parts. One is the workbook, which is the complete Excel asset, and inside every workbook you have multiple worksheets. So first thing is you use this particular workbook, and this is a class which will help you to actually get the access over the complete Excel. So if you see here, we are using the poi jars which we just included into our project. Okay, so this particular poi jars is what will give you the access, or the have contains the classes which will help you access the Excel file. Right. So first you will have to save the object into a workbook object, and from the workbook object you can get the sheet. Okay, so you can always get the complete list of sheets, and if you know the sheet name, you can just you say get sheet and the sheet name. So at this particular point, so you have access at sheet level. So from here, what we're going to do is we're gonna read a particular cell in the Excel and see if we can actually access the value which is present inside the Excel. Okay. So again, an Excel contains rows and a column. So first you need to say what is the row and what is the column. Okay. So these are all the list of functions which are available. So from this we have to get row. So 0 dot get cell 0 dot get string value. Okay, so let me just do a sys of this. Okay, so let's run this and see if we are able to read this particular. So it has to print username. Okay, so first rows, first element. So let's see. No such file or directory. Right. Oh, so you don't really need that column. Let's see. Until save. No such file. Right. Okay. So there was another additional row over there. So I just remove that row from the Excel. So this is the first row, first column. So this is the value which we have read, right? Now you can always iterate through the list of columns and you can actually get the values accordingly. Okay. So you can get the last row number, so which will actually give you the number of rows which are present. So let's see. Let's see. Iterate and print all the values. Okay. So for I plus plus. So we know that we will have to read column 1 and column 2, right? So I'm gonna keep this as row and I'm gonna make this as column 0 and column 1. Column 2 is column 3, basically third position is what we will have to generate. So let's see if we will get all the values. Okay. So username, password, Sudish, username, password, Vishwan and everything. Clear? Okay. You guys understand this or not? Any questions? So next is we're gonna see how you can use this Excel, automate the inputs for our program and generate the output back. So, guys, did you guys understand or you guys are lost? No questions? Okay, fine. So we're gonna go ahead and see how we can use this particular Excel in our Selenium test case. Before that, what I'm going to do is the best again. So going back to our page object model, the best way is actually create a class which contains all the functionalities of starting an Excel. Okay, getting a row, getting a column, getting a string value, and saving it back into a file. So reading, writing. So if you can, so what we should do is, okay, I will give you this particular class. Okay, so this contains all the functions or functionalities which will help you to interact with the Excel. Okay, so if you have to go through this code, so here I have these two public variables, which is nothing but the existing workbook and the existing sheet. Okay, and I have a function written which helps me to read the particular file, Excel file, and a particular Excel sheet inside a file. Okay, that is this particular function. So if you see here, I have the file input stream. I accept the file path. Okay, so whatever we have written here, I have generalized. Okay, not this. Right. So whatever we have written here, I have generalized into multiple functions so that I don't have to rewrite this piece of code in every test case of mine. Okay. So first function, open an Excel. Second function, to get a row as such. Okay, so we are getting the physical number of rows. Okay, and next is to actually read. Hello. Hello. Hi guys. Sorry, there was a connection lost. Yes, I think there is a question. In today's program, you defined it as static. Yes. So you guys don't have idea about what is a static? What's the use of a static? Hello. You guys there? Am I audible? Okay. So a static is again a functionality of in Java. Okay. So if I have to explain what is a static, let me take a sample example and explain you guys. So you guys, so everybody have the same question. So you guys know I have no idea regarding what is a static. Okay. So I'm going to explain you using a sample program. Okay. So you guys do have idea regarding what is a class variable? Yes. Right. So let me tell you guys sample one dot add. Okay. So this is the piece of code which I have written over here. Yeah, again, this is nothing but basics of Java. So can you guys tell me what will be the order of input and the respective values? Can you just print? or type it out, the order in which the print statements will occur, and what will be those respective values. One. One is the first statement you think will be printed. Okay. Next. Okay. A plus B equal to 2. Okay. Let me make it simple for you guys. Okay. Now, okay. So, just to let you guys know, the order of execution will be A plus B equal to, then it will be sample dot A equal to sample dot B equal to sample one dot A equal to sample one dot B equal to. So just fill up the blanks. A plus B equal to 2, sample dot A equal to 2. Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you guys just print in one set everything instead of one by one? It is pretty confusing. Just take what I sent you guys. Just send it back in this one. Just fill up the blank and paste it here. Still thinking? Okay, so we have one output. A plus B equal to 2, yes. A will be equal to 1, yes. B will be equal to 1, yes. Then A plus B will be equal to 4. Right. Yeah. L to equal to. Correct. So that's right. So which essentially means that we have integer A as 0 and integer B as 1. These two are class variables, which essentially means every time I create a new object, there will be a new memory allocation which will happen to this particular two variables. Okay, so when I write sample equal to new sample, so for this object there will be one A and one B memory allocation made. When I write again sample one new sample, for this object there will be another new variable A and B which will be created. Okay, so that is nothing but a class variable, right? So if when I actually pass this particular add, whenever I call this particular add, I always call it with respect to the object reference, right? So this particular function knows which particular variable of which object I am actually calling. Okay, since I am calling it through the object, so when I call it over here, inside the add, the A is pointing to 0 and 1, okay, of one location. When I call to with sample 1, okay, it's again pointing to A and B, which is a new location but not the same location where it has added earlier. Okay, so that is why it's whenever it adds, it always starts with 0 and 1. Okay, whenever I in this at this particular point, A and B value is 0 and 1. At this particular point, A and B value is again 0 and 1. But this particular A and B belongs to this sample object, and this particular A and B over here belongs to sample 1 object. So they are two different items. So that is a typical class variable object, right? So let's just execute this and verify the output. Right. Okay. But when I make this particular object class variables as static, okay, so can you guys tell me what will be the output now? So let me explain you the concept. So in a normal class variable, when I created this particular object sample and sample 1, a new memory allocation of A and B as asset, which means a new A and B over here is made, and another A and B is again made at this particular point. But when I make a static, when I declare this particular value as static, which essentially means that irrespective of any number of instances I make, there will be only one memory allocation of A and B. So the A and B which is being accessed over here is same as the A and B which is accessed over here. Okay, so in that scenario, what will be the output? Mm, I don't think this will be the output. So if we see, right, so we have one answer. Okay, so what actually happens? So what Ragnet has said is correct. Okay, so the first output will be 2. Why? So first we initialize a class, so it doesn't really matter, you need a class variable to access this particular variables. So you can actually write a and B inside over here. Okay, so you don't really need an object reference for this. So even if you write AB, it will still work. Okay, but we will see. So we will run a couple of times and we will see the differences. Okay, so here when I call this add function, at this particular point of time, the value of a is 0 and B is equal to 1. Okay, so the add calls, so here the value of the first time A will become 1 and B will again become 1, correct? So 1 plus 1 minus 1, so it will be 1, so the output will be 2. So the print statement will give 1 and 1. Okay, now when I call it over here again, so at this particular point of time, the A value is not 0 but it is 1. Why? Because it is static and it is for irrespective of any number of instances you make, it will be pointing to a same location, which means the A value is being changed, and at this particular point of time the A value is 1 and the B value is also 1. Okay, then I call this particular function. So A is 1 and addition value is 2, so 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay, and here also 2 plus B value is 1, 3 minus 1 is 2. So the output value will be 5, and when it comes here, since I have changed the value of A, so the output will be 3 and here the output will be 2. Okay, so let's see, let's run it and see. Okay, so this is what a static means. Now there is another condition that you cannot use, and so whenever you declare a main, it's always a public static. So this function, whatever you created itself, is static. Okay, now the rule is in Java is you cannot use a non-static variable inside a static function, which essentially means if this particular items I mean the variables are not static, which means I cannot give like this a dot toString and b dot toString, because the memory allocation for this particular variables has to be different for every object. So it becomes mandatory that you use an object reference and a variable name of to access the particular variables. But when I make this variables as static, so it doesn't really matter which object I'm using to refer these variables. all the objects of this class are pointing to a same particular memory allocation. So even if I write without the object reference, the output is going to stay the same, because A and B are universal, okay, for this particular class, and irrespective of the which object, how many objects you make, it's going to point to the same variables. So even at this point, the output will be same, and the program will execute successfully. Okay, so that is the reason why you have a restriction that inside a static function you cannot use a non-static variables, and that is the precise reason why I have to make, where is this access. So since my main is a static, okay, and when I have to access a variable, it is mandatory that I declare them as a static. Whereas if I am creating a page object model, I don't create any function as static. I create it as a normal function. So since it is not a, there is no static function inside this, so I can make it as a non-static variable. So why? Because to access this particular function, I have to use a variable, a object reference. So if you see here, this is not a static function. This is a non-static function. So in order to access this particular function, I had to go through a variable. So when I go through a object instance of a class, so this particular function will know that which particular instance of class I'm calling and what is the value of those variables. So I don't really have to use an object reference to access the variable over here. Okay, so that is the reason when I wrote this public static void main, I had to make this as a static, whereas when I'm actually creating a normal function, I don't really have to make them static, because to access this function I have to go through a object instance of this class. Okay, clear? Confused? What is a static variable? What is a static function? What is a non-static function? What is a non-static variable? A non-static variable is nothing but a class variable. Both are class variables, but there are two varieties: static variables and non-static variables. Hope this small exercise would help you in understanding another concept in Java. Okay, fine. So, clear, or you guys have questions? Okay, fine. So let's continue with our Excel exercise. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is create a page object model of this. It's not exactly a page object model. All I'm trying to do is create a class which contains all the functionalities of to deal with the Excel as such. Okay, so one function I created to actually access and read a sheet in an Excel. The second function I created to get the number of rows in an Excel. The third function I created to get a string value. Okay, so I give the row number and the column number, and I read the respective string value which is present inside that Excel. Okay, now an Excel may contain a string or integer or a date format or etc. So it is important that when you make a function, you also make functions for reading a double. So if you know that the particular cell which you are trying to read contains a double, so you can actually call this particular function. Okay, same way, to actually write a string value into a cell and to save the complete Excel back to the file. Okay, so first accessing the Excel, second getting the number of rows, third reading a string value. So it can also be an integer. So a Excel can always contain a integer also. Okay, So you need to know what is the data type which you are trying to read from the Excel. So a function to read a string value from the cell, a function to read double. Right now it is not really required from the function from the cell. A function to write back a string value into a cell which we need. Okay, and a function to save this particular whole complete Excel back into the file. Okay, so if you go through it function line by function details. So first, in reading a complete Excel, what I have done is I have created a file input stream, and I will have to pass the path of the file which I will have to read. So this will contain the Excel file. Okay, so I will have to pass the path of the file just the way I used here. So this, when I call the function, I'll have to pass this, and I'll also have to pass the sheet name in which I want to read the Excel. So once I do this, this particular class object, whichever I use, will be pointing to the sheet of my desire. Okay. The next is I actually use this wrote this function to get the number of rows which are present in this Excel. Okay. So that this particular function will give me the number of rows which are present in the Excel. So if you see here, I'm using the same class object Excel sheet. So it is mandatory that first I call this function, and then I set these variables, and then I call any of the following functions, so that the variables are set, and this particular variable will be pointing to some file and some sheet in a system. Okay, so I'm going to use this particular variables throughout in accessing any cell or content inside an Excel. Okay, so this is another function where I have written I input the number of the row number and the column number, and this particular code is going to go to that particular row. So Excel sheet dot get row will give me the row. Okay, and in that row I'll say go for this particular column. So it will actually select a particular cell. So when I give a row and a column, what we get is a single cell. And I say this particular cell data dot get me the string value present in that particular cell. Okay, and I'm returning this particular value. So when I give the row and a column, I'll get a string value out of this function. Same way the double. So I say get row, get cell, get numeric cell value. It will return me the numeric value which is present inside the cell. Okay, now once I figure out, I read the inputs, I perform my test, I will have an output. So I will have to write the automation program to write it back into the Excel. For example, I use this username password, I try logging in, and then I do a login check. If it is successful, I say successful. If it is failed, I say failed. Okay, so I need a function. Say when I give the row number and the column and the input value, it will have to write it back to the cell. Okay, so it will have to, in that cell position, it has to store this value. Okay, and finally once you have do all the processing, once you actually write all these values, at the end you will have to so everything will be kept in the memory. Okay, so whatever is present in the memory has to be written back into the file. So the hard copy file over here, so we'll have to write it back to the file, for which I have written another function to save the Excel data. Now in this, what I do is I write, so for reading I use file input stream, for writing I use file output stream. I provide the file path to save, to write back. Okay, and I use this particular variable which contains all the data, and I say write it back to the file, and then finally I say close. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and write a simple Selenium program which will help us in accessing the Excel and automating our test case. Due to time constraint, I'm not actually creating a page object model for this page since it's just a login and username and login. So I'm gonna straight away go ahead and write a Selenium program. Okay, so how do we do this? So again, it starts before and then I say driver dot what is the syntax? So this is the syntax: manage timeouts, implicit wait, 10 seconds, and then I say driver dot navigate to the URL. And then I'm gonna say the rate test. Okay, so this is so far simple and what we have seen earlier. You guys are clear in this, what I have written? So all I did is started and ended my page. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to, since I'm doing a specific task, login for multiple people, I have to make sure that I log out every time and log in, right? So So we're gonna use let me just execute this once. Let's check. So how can we do this? Okay, I'll have to write the automation inside. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have to find out the way to log out and then log in back. Okay, so we have this logic. First step, create the Excel, access as Excel. So let me just get this. So I'm gonna have to write the logic here of we're gonna do a login check for multiple people, and we're gonna write it back to the Excel accordingly. Okay. So first is I have created the object. So I created an object for this class. Okay. And first step is to actually get the Excel object created. Okay. So this will be my first function to create, to call. And to this function, I will have to pass my file path. And the sheet name. Okay, so this is a constructor. If you see, it has the same class name. So this function is nothing but a constructor. So when you call the function, you'll have to pass these files. So which basically ensures that you don't call any other function till and until you actually set the Excel objects. Okay. Now I can actually straight away call the read function, get number of rows. Okay, here I say and the same thing for fine. Now I can actually read what is the username password from the Excel. So whatever code we have seen here, we're gonna follow the same thing. Okay. So but here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this object and say get cell data string row number column number. So and I don't really need the first row and first column, so I say start with 1. Okay, so it will start with row 1, not row 0, row 1. Okay, and I will store this into username column 0 will be username, column 1 will be password. How? Because we already know the Excel format. Okay, now we're gonna use our Selenium API to actually enter the values into the UI. So I'm gonna say driver dot find element dot by id dot no, the numbering over here in the Excel is 1, but when you actually read, the number count always starts with 0. Okay, so don't worry, it will be correct. So I'm gonna make entries into those text boxes. Find element by id dot send keys username dot send keys password. Okay, and then I'm gonna have to make a click event. So driver dot find elements by id. Since I have an id, I'm going by id. Okay. Now the next step is to find if the login has successfully happened or not. Correct? And for that we have already written the piece of logic, login case, and we're gonna use the same thing. We're gonna make sure the title is exists, and if title dot equals which means the login is successful. So in the Excel, for the given row, I will have to set the cell data I, and the column will be second column. I mean index 2, which essentially is third position, as successful, else fail. And once this is done, and now I have to make an additional task of logging out. Why? Because I will have to make another entry into text box. So it is important that I log out. For which I will have to make sure that I wait till a particular element is clickable. So light blue, that's the class name. So ideally I have to click this. Once I click this, I will get this particular logout anchor tag, right? So I'll have to first, and then I'll have to click on this. Then the logout will happen. For which I'm gonna find a unique. Right. So here I'm going to use the CSS selector and say click over the anchor tag which has href as this. Href is an attribute and it's the value. Now in order to make sure that I am able to click on this, I will have to write an explicit wait. Okay, so I have to tell the program to wait till this element is clickable. Okay, and we have seen a sample explicit wait. Right. So I will give this particular item as selected. And once I click on logout, I'll just make sure that logout has happened successfully. So again, I'll have to write and wait. Okay, so once I said that this particular element is successfully logged in or not, in order for me to perform another login check, I'll have to log out, for which I'll have to wait to make sure that the particular top right element is clickable. Okay, for which I write an explicit wait and I give a condition that make sure the particular element is clickable. Okay, then I make the click events and then I explicitly make sure the logout has happened, so that when I try accessing the elements again in the next iteration, I will make sure that the text boxes are ready for entering the values. Okay. Now at the end of it, once I write all the values, I say access Excel. So I'll have to write back the content into the file. So I will give a new file name, Excel2. So my output will be, so you can use the same Excel or you can give a new Excel, doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's just run this and see. The page opens, value is entered. So now we are waiting to make sure the element is clickable. So max we will wait for 30 seconds. If it takes more than 30 seconds, our program will ideally fail. So we'll have to increase the amount of time of waiting. Okay. So irrespective of that, if I think our Excel has to be changed. So if you see here, so I think there is some problem in logout. So irrespective of that, our target is to actually write a test case of writing it back. So if you see here, the successful has actually happened over here. So if we same way, if we are able to log out and log in again, so we will be able to fill up this Excel, read the input values accordingly, and fill up this Excel accordingly. Okay, so there is some issue. Okay, so let's change the logic. I think there is some issue in post clicking. So what I will say is, once it is done, let's just navigate back to the graph.html and continue with our process. Login failed. That's the second one. Right. So here it is actually checking one after the other, and if you go and now open the Excel, you will see the output has automatically come up. Okay, so this is how you can actually use an Excel for inputting your inputs and getting your inputs, list of inputs for testing your application, and at the same time you can always write back the output generated by the web application. Okay, so just to revise what we have done, so we have written a function or a class which helps us to actually do all the operations over the Excel. Okay, and then we have written a sample Selenium test case in JUnit, which will take the input of login from the Excel, test the login, and accordingly write back the result into the Excel. So here what we have done is, in the before test, the same as usual. So we have initialized the WebDriver, set the implicit wait time, open the web page, and we have also initialized the Excel object, where you will actually, we have given the path of the Excel and the sheet where our input details are present. And then in the test case, we have taken the number of rows present. We have read the number of rows present in the Excel, which is basically the number of input and output, input username passwords which we are supposed to test. Okay. Then we have iterated over every row. we have read the input username and password, okay, and we have made an entry of that particular username and password into the UI, and then we made a login, and then we tested if the this was the condition for our login check. So we make sure the title is readable or not. So if the title is not readable, the login has failed. So when the login failed, what we did is, in the Excel, we have the third column, which is the index 2, is for actually writing back the output, whether the login is successfully happened or not. So we are in the column 2, we have written success if the login has successfully happened, and fail if the login has failed, which essentially means the username password is wrong. And then we reloaded the login page, and we executed all the rows. And at the end, I closed the browser, and whatever is stored in the memory, so everything was written inside this variable alone. So this variable was having the virtual copy of the complete Excel sheet data. So now I have to write it back into the hard file. So the function which we use here will actually write back, use the file output stream, and write back the data into that particular file where I have given the path. So this was the exercise of how to read and into inputs from Excel, how you can use the inputs in automating your test case. This was one simple sample. Now the scenarios may vary as per the use case. Okay, and finally we have also seen how you can actually write back the data to Excel. Clear? Any questions? Everybody clear? If you have any doubts, please ask right now. Right. So what actually happens is, when you say Excel object dot set cell data into Excel as string, okay. So what actually happens is, uh, the complete data or whatever you write, okay, it's not instantly written back into the file. It is not written into the file. Okay, it is being stored into this variable. So this Excel sheet contains the virtual copy. So it contains whatever data which was existing into its variable. So it will be inside memory only. It will not be into the file. Okay. So if you want, so you make some modifications, you actually read few cells you want to store. So ideally, if you have to say, we'll be storing the data or whatever file which you pass here, content, into this Excel. Okay, so this particular Excel variable will just have whatever value you give in the memory. So it will know that, okay, so in this particular row, in this position, this value exists. So it will have only a virtual copy. Okay, but if you want the same thing back into the file, you will have to write it back to the file. So which essentially means you will have to give a file path. Okay, and we're going to use this file output stream, and we're gonna perform a writing. So we're gonna write into the hard disk a file of whatever is present inside its memory. So whatever is present inside the memory of this variable is going to write it back completely into the Excel sheet. So that is the writing operation which you perform. Okay, so just by setting the cell data, so all we do is we set the cell data. Okay, so after we set the cell data, we'll have to write the complete data, whatever you finally formed, into the hard file. So that is what this particular writing back to the Excel operation which we did. Clear? Okay. So I will send you guys the code today, the yesterday's code, today's code, everything. I will zip it, and I will also give you the URL today, so that over the weekend you guys can practice if you want. Okay. So I think this is it for today.